Hello everyone, this is Eric, the Asian movie enthusiast, and this is my review of The Housemaid, a Vietnamese horror film from 2016. Set in Vietnam during 1953, while the country was still under French colonial rule, this film begins with a young woman desperately looking for a job after the countryside was devastated by bombings. Now, her family died in some air raids, which places her in a very difficult position. In a state of desperation, she travels by foot to a mansion, which is situated within the grounds of a plantation that nowadays has only minimal activity. Now, she travels there because the French owner is in need of a housemaid. So she interviews with one of the workers there, and they decide to hire her on a trial basis. Now, one reason that they decide to hire her is that most servants will not work at this location, because hundreds of people have died over the years while working on the plantation when it was functioning at full force. Now, their bodies were buried in a nearby forest that is part of the estate. So, some people choose to stay away from this place. And to make matters worse, some disturbing events occurred that are related to the owner's deceased wife. So, needless to say, some weird stuff starts happening in and around this mansion. Now, the first thing you're going to notice regarding The Housemaid is that it is beautifully shot. The cinematography is really something special here and really makes the visuals pop, even in dimly lit scenes. Not only is the mansion itself showcased nicely, but the surrounding pond, waterways, and forest are also captured in visually captivating ways. And consequently, most of the horror sequences are oddly beautiful to look at while they're happening. And speaking of scare tactics, many scenes involve a ghost woman, but she's more of a Western-style ghost instead of a Japanese onryo. And as you probably already know, other Asian countries like South Korea and Thailand have borrowed the Japanese onryo, character design for ghosts over the years for their own films. The spirit in The Housemaid, though, is a bit different. She's dressed in black instead of white. She has white eyes and a little almost black crown on her head. She's similar in some ways to something like the woman in black, so to speak. She's also rather aggressive and uses physical objects against the protagonist. So I enjoyed the ghost design and her, characteristics and temperament quite a bit in this movie. And on a related note, much of the film overall actually feels more European than Asian in some aspects. Not only in terms of style, but because of its casting of multiple Caucasian actors. Now, there are a few jump scares at play here, which I'm generally not a fan of. I was actually worried a little bit near the beginning of this film because there were a few jump scares within a fairly short period of time, and I was like, is this all I'm going to get in this movie? But thankfully, there's only a handful of them that are scattered throughout the remaining runtime, so not a big problem for me. Also, the film contributes a few memorable horror sequences. There's one scene near the beginning of the film that takes place near a waterway that's rather unnerving. It's supplemented with a good score as well, an ambient, atmospheric score. So that scene kind of made a good impression early on. And there are a few scenes in the forest at night that are very cool and atmospheric as well. There is a bit of bloody violence, but only a little. Now, the lead actress is good. I liked her. I don't think she was anything exceptional, but she did the job nicely. The story we've seen before in certain aspects, but it is spiced up a bit when an unexpected French visitor arrives near the midpoint, which I wasn't really, I was not anticipating that. That particular subplot was resolved in a fairly unexpected way as well. The relationship between our protagonist, the housemaid, and her employer was also somewhat different from what I had expected going into this film. I didn't really watch any trailers or read any plot synopses. All I knew was that it was supposed to be a good horror film. Now, the script focuses way more on the human characters and their relationships instead of the history of the ghost or its motivations, which I think is a positive in this case. The protagonist does not go on a long investigation in the middle of the movie, to find out how the ghost really died, when she was human, or how to counteract her curse or anything like that. You really do not get that at all here. And, that's a cliche that I could do without, in ghost films a lot of times. I will say that the story gets rather convoluted and confusing a little bit near the end. However, the final plot turn is interesting, and it will make the viewer think in order to kind of put together some of the pieces. It's not incredibly complicated or anything, but there are a few things you need to think through in order to make any sense of them. And I do think most of the ending does make sense, with the exception of maybe a few little ambiguities tossed in there. So, in summary, I do recommend The Housemaid. It's a good solid horror flick. If you want a good Asian horror flick from Vietnam from recent years, this is one to go to. It's available on Blu-ray and Region 2 DVD with English subtitles, and that's the UK release. And as always, I will see you next time.